congressional seat you can win.
And there's nobody.
Does he want to run for suits? Maybe.
There's nobody. No Republican really statewide as a prospective candidate has, you know, sort of his statewide profile. It's not to say somebody who can step in on money or that you're always going to get Travis out.
I don't know. The Trump stench is so strong, and I just don't.
Well, here's what I think. I think that Trump Trump's out of office.
Yes, that's.
And I don't get into that here, but I just think that, you know, he's, I think, done a pretty good job walking a fine line, not being an anti-Trumper, but not, you know, being identified with him. People be painted with him. You know, Trump's the president, he runs, no question. Oh,
Why is he going to be able to say, look, you know, this is, well, he
should read his speech. You're missing a point. Who else is out there? I mean, they want people to. There's more to running.
You should read his
I'll fix home.
read his Wednesday speech. His Wednesday speech was the best speech he could, and he prevented an affirmative defense of himself, starting with homelessness and contrasting with the rest of the state.
Thanks everyone for being on this task force. This is when the fun part starts. I think the focus group report that I sent out, which you can take several passes through, I designed it so that you could digest it quickly with a 2-pager and then kind of go a little deeper and a little deeper. And then that slideshow, that 15-page slideshow that made the rounds last week seems like pretty helpful to people. I think that was a good exercise for me just to go through it at a very high level and crystallize the biggest points. So I think, if anyone has questions on the focus group, those kind of speak for themselves. I'm happy to discuss that process some more, but I think we're all pretty well versed in it. So I think that we should spend most of our time today talking about the next steps that John and I talked about and that he put on paper for going forward, because we really do have a pretty short timetable for what. There's Victor. Hey, Victor. We really do have a tight turnaround, right, for getting things to the full board. Our board meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, Patty, is April 17th. April 17th. So I thought just for ease, we should set ourselves a deadline of April 1st to get the draft of this task force report ready, and then we'll be in good shape. But obviously that is in only a few short months, at a time when I know and I imagine some others of you are fully enmeshed in this thing called an election. So there's not a lot of time, and we're all pretty busy. So I think today, if we can take a look at that document, discuss it, fine tune it, figure out if that's the path we want to take, and then maybe set some future meeting dates. The beauty of that, and I'll turn the mic over to John if no one has any questions about the focus groups. I don't want to give that too short shrift, but I do think we have ample time to digest that. The beauty of John's approach with 5 kind of themes, 5 concepts, is that we could tackle one of those a week between now and April 1st. That would give us a lot of time for each individual subject, which I think is appropriate and a good use of our time, because that's really where the rubber is going to hit the road. Anyone have any questions at this point? Anyone think that's a good approach? I mean, why don't I pass the mic? Hearing nothing, I'll pass the mic to John, and he can talk a little bit about, his background with strategic planning, his thought process to help prepare this document, which I hope you guys all have in front of you for easy reference. John, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so thanks, Matt. Like a lot of you, I've been a part of a lot of strategic plans in my career in non-for-profit organizations. I've led a few processes too. There's no exact right way to do it. I think you have to kind of go with what you think feels right as far as what the organization is capable of achieving in the time frame they have laid out. I do think the ones I've seen that tend to move most efficiently and most effectively do kind of look like what we've put together here, and that's the goal of this committee and this group, and where the brain power of the people assembled here is around determining what are the 5, and it can be more, that's just tends to be a number we arrive at, 5 big items or buckets that this organization needs to rally behind for the next 2 to 3 years. So the things that are most pressing. Oftentimes for organizations like ours, that'll be things like membership, meetings, marketing, but it doesn't have to be those things, but those tends to be, the kind of an example of what those are like. Then this group thinks, after determining what they think are those, for each one, spend some time deciding what are our strategies, which are sort of the next level down. So they're big and lofty, but not too particular or specific. And then what are the goals underneath each strategy? So in the document, there's a couple of examples there of how that might lay out. Honestly, it does get a little, we don't want to get too hung up on, well, is that a strategy or a goal or a tactic? I mean, that'll bog us down. But if we feel like it might give us a chance to kind of think through things as, well, that seems very tactical, so we'll leave that for when the next stage, which would be more around your staff teams sort of building upon the strategies and goals and developing real particular measurable tactics. So anyway, that's sort of what this is built around. The one thing that would have been great, and it may not be too late, would be you've got the focus group data, which is good, but I don't know if this group's looked at any other sort of data points that would help drive or determine what those things are. A lot of times I see success in, let's look at our membership trends, our chapter trend, that kind of stuff. I don't know that we've had a chance to look at that kind of thing. But that, I'll just sort of leave it at that if you have any questions. But I think it's a process and a way forward, and it could be adjusted as we go along.
Yeah, and just to put a fine point on the end of that, Victor and the task force before I joined it did a lot of work with getting other data points. There was a survey that got almost 10% of our membership to respond. It skewed older. I'm forgetting the specific demographics. There were some caveats, but there was also some good information in that. So this focus group is by no means the only data point that we have. I think that information is super helpful, and that's also on our site. And we all are, or were, pretty familiar with it.
Good.
I spent a lot of time with it. Victor and others walked us through that in San Antonio.
A lot of what we did with the focus group, I think, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
With the focus group, and Mike jump in here, I think definitely happened because of what we saw in the survey. So for example, we knew it skewed older, so we knew we needed to make sure that we got younger people in there. So we did the pro and the student in the student group. A lot of the questions I think that were derived from the focus group or for the focus group were also came as discussion from the survey. So I think those two data sets kind of work hand in hand. Mike, I don't know if you can. Yeah, he just says this. Yeah, and there's really good info in that survey, though. Just because it's skewed older doesn't mean it. There was really great information in the survey as well.
Yeah, and there wasn't a big difference between genders, age groups, things like that, as far as what people wanted, what they the ideas, what the big ideas were, things like that. And the focus groups just kind of flushed out what we saw there.
Yeah, I really agree. I mean, I wasn't as intimately involved as all the rest of you in the first half of the work, but I've spent a lot of time digesting it. And I do think you're right, Yvette, that they build on one another, and that the questions we asked and the way we framed the discussion and sought more specificity was a direct outgrowth of all the work that preceded it. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, I do think that we have gone above and beyond. I will make this point. We've gone above and beyond the outreach that we had set in place at the beginning. We had thought maybe 2 focus groups. We did more than that. Some kind of lured more people to the table than others, but I thought that one student focus group with just a handful of students was super helpful, and maybe even better in a sense than the pro one, where there was a lot more people at the table sharing really good ideas, but we kind of went deeper with that. And so I think, I just props again to all of you guys for kind of setting up the strategies that got us to this point. I do think we, 10%, maybe it could have been 20%, maybe it could have been 15% with that initial survey, but it's still, as Mike and Yvette just pointed out, really good data that we can use to build upon. Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll share some thoughts here. I think we have an excellent data set of what our current members across the board, different demographics think about what we bring them or don't bring them. But I see some holes as we start to try to put our five buckets together and what those priorities in those buckets might be. I would really like to see some charts that help us understand our financial stability, which is one of John's talking points in what he put together. And by that, I don't mean giant Excel sheets that are really difficult to dig through, but some revenue lines, some expense lines, maybe look at our top 5 revenue drivers, our top 5 expense categories, and just kind of understand over a 5-year period, a 10-year period, whatever, right? How those have been moving. So that's the first category I'd like more information on to think about our financial stability. I'd like the same on membership and broken down in a few different categories. Like, I don't know what's available in terms of categories, but how are we, can we see a fever line on pros versus students versus working journalists versus academics, et cetera, et cetera. So we know how our population has changed over, again, a decade, 2 decades. I can put all this in writing as well, guys, but I'm just kind of throwing out some things that I think will be helpful for us to understand. I think we definitely need a good inventory of what our competing pro-press groups are out there doing. Because I think it's, we keep talking about we're the Swiss Army knife. We try to be everything to everybody, but ONA, they do this so well, and RTDNA, they do this so well. So that information exists somewhere, right? I know Dave Collier has collected. I'm sure Jennifer in the office, John, probably has some easy way to put us together a list, a chart that gives us some key takeaways from our, whatever we identify as, or maybe our 15 closest competitors or something like that. Like, what are their size? What is their membership sweet spot? Like, what do they really go after in terms of members? Maybe the annual membership cost, right? So we can just see all in one page. Here's who we're competing against as we think about membership initiatives. And then I think one of our categories will likely be programming, and that's where I think it gets most difficult to make decisions, because we try to be all things to all people and have for these 110 years as we've added more and more services. I know, Victor, when we first started this whole process, we put together a slideshow that just had a few slides that kind of talked about the many things we do. 10 committees, 5 communities, here's 8 bullet points about the things we typically say we do. I think all of this is leading to whether we want to take some things off of our list as we get to April 1, after April 1. I don't think that we should build a strategic plan that simply says we're going to, anyway, I think we need to think about whether we're of a mind, have an appetite to suggest removing anything as we go forward. So those are my immediate takeaways. I think we've done a really good job of collecting lots of current member feedback and impressions. But as Matt said when we sat down, now the work begins.
Matt, if I could just jump in really briefly, I think so much ground has been covered. I thank everybody for that, because it was really a group effort this past year. But, not only were there really terrific data points and sort of a fresh foundation for us to understand where the challenges and opportunities can take us, but also there's really good anecdotal sort of sentiment that was expressed through the survey. And we talked a lot about it in San Antonio, so maybe this is really for the benefit of John. But I think just the timing of, look, the reality of when the survey was shared, sort of on the backside of the height of a lot of frustration and a lot of communication breakdowns and some things happening at the chapter level that different parts of the country were letting us know that they were frustrated, and the survey was another opportunity for them to do so. That the things for the last few months, and you guys are all closer to it than I, but seem to have smoothed out. And I think that the survey told us how important, or reminded most of us how important these sort of principles and values are, and this was their way of trying to hold power to account, and that we are accountable to what those actions and behaviors are. And so it would be good. I think my point here is that we think about these things in a maybe an annual approach to not only monitor the data and the trends and where we could go strategically, but also just another touch point for the sentiment and the feel and the outlook and the culture across the organization, because we got a whole lot of feedback across, to Mike's point, spanning sort of generations and backgrounds and et cetera, et cetera. We got an earful many times over. And so we just need to keep revisiting that and trying to achieve better. And I think we're on a much better path to do so.
Are you suggesting that we should do annual surveys then, Victor? Or is that you're basically what you're
I
saying?
like it as an annual survey, and we talked immediately after about how we can improve the process, and coming back to that it's skewed heavily older for a variety of reasons likely, and we introduced the survey largely through email. So maybe a better emphasis to reaching younger people is to do it through like texting technologies and things like that. So I think there's an opportunity to improve the process, but the gain is worth it. And if we did it, it became a summertime annual thing before EIJ or something that we look to on the calendar each year, or every other year. It might be very beneficial on a number of fronts.
I like that idea. I mean, it was obviously, as you know, it was a heavy lift to synthesize that data, but I think it's super helpful. And one of the things I really like is that our strategic plan is not a 5 or a 10-year plan. It's 2 or 3 years, so that we can be more nimble, which I think SPJ hasn't done as well as it could have in the past years. And being informed by that, it's like when you look at like Pew data over decades, it really informs you about trends. And so you're not just, as you say, jumping in when everyone's hating on SPJ because of some personality conflicts. You really get a sense over time of where those numbers are. I like that idea.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that the membership would become accustomed to, especially if we do a every summer or whenever we want to have it in the year, they would become accustomed to it. They would know that it's coming up. We've had a lot of drama. It's true, and I think that everything seems important all at the same time. And I think that if we do this and continue to do it, then they'll know, yeah, I get a chance to speak my mind every June or whatever. Not to say that they wouldn't want us to respond to something more sooner than that, but yeah, I think that they would become accustomed to that as well.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that issue, the concept of a recurring survey?
One of the things I would...
Taylor, I think that's...
Go ahead,
Go ahead
Taylor.
on the call. Taylor, why don't you talk?
Oh, I was just going to say, I like that idea. I think it's like a good idea to check in and see how people's thoughts change by the year. So yeah, collecting that data would be useful.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add that, if we did the survey late spring or early summer, that would give us time to share the results with whoever's running for the board, and if it affects like their plans for the coming year, or it at least will give us something to talk about at the membership meetings during EIJ. So, having data a little bit earlier, that might help make sure that the new boards, whenever they're elected, they can come in and they can start acting on ideas pretty quickly.
That's a good insight. I like that.
I was
Patty,
just going to add that whatever we decide, if we put a plan in place, put a plan on paper on April 1, important to communicate that really fully with membership so that they know we're not just asking them the same set of questions, but hey, we've made some changes. We have this plan. Here's what it looks like. We're going to revisit it. Your voice is important as we go forward. Be sure to look at the plan again before you weigh in, because sometimes people, I think, have to be reminded several times and be provided information several times to key in on it. So for us to really get meaningful input, we have to make sure that they're going to look at whatever new directions we set in place. And of course, they'll judge whether they're seeing any evidence of that.
Yeah. And I think that can be part of our strategy. I think that shows a commitment to our members, a willingness to engage, even if there's, issues that we're not, that may reflect poorly on the group. And I do think it's worth letting people know that. I do think that this will be a good opportunity for this group or another to really spend some time looking at which questions are asked and the mechanism. I do think when we asked the survey last time, it was kind of, I'm assuming it was envisioned as a one-off, not as a recurring thing. So we may want to brainstorm the types of questions we ask, the ways that we ask them, and to a point that I know we've talked about many times, how we get membership to respond. Thinking of how younger members will respond to the survey is crucial because, whether that's text messages or whatever, we should think about that. All good stuff. Okay. So how do we want to proceed from here? Do we want to collect, I think, first of all, does anyone want any more information? I think what Patty is talking about would be great if it's one sheets for our finances, for membership trends, maybe over the past decade, for a menu of offerings, like the communities, committees, everything that we do now as has been set off in the Swiss Army knife of journalism. Just a list of that so we can decide what may need to become less important or be removed from our Swiss Army knife. And then a list of I think this is important, a list of the other groups. Let's talk about that for a second. Patty talked about getting information size, the membership sweet spot for these organizations, their annual membership cost. Beyond those 3 data points, what else do we want from these other 10 or 15 groups? Anyone? I think that's a good
This
start.
is Taylor. I was wondering if it would be useful to get, and this might be part of that, but to get information about what other journalists think those groups do well. Like, what do they think of when they think of IRE or ONA? Just because if they're aside from what the data that the organizations maintain, but what do people think of when they think of those groups?
That's a good inclination. I'm not sure that we can get anything proprietary, but we certainly can get anything that they have on their websites in terms of their particular focus. And that would be,
I guess I just mean what the common person would think, or what a regular journalist not getting that data, proprietary information from the groups, but what does the average journalist think of when they consider why they're a member of those groups? Like, why are they a member? What's the value they get out of each group, so we know what they think those groups do well.
mm-hmm.
How would you suggest obtaining that, Taylor?
I mean, it could just be included in a survey that we do. I don't know. Haven't thought that through that far ahead, but I would think if we're going to be surveying our members, we could also survey journalists about what they think about when they think of each of the different organizations.
Yeah.
Mike Riley, one of the things that we need to get from the other orgs is what their membership was 5 years ago and what it is today. So we have a point of reference to see who's growing, who's not.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that'd be good. And one of the things I was going to say is that ASAE may have some of this data, so I can check in and see if they already consolidate and collect information on organizations like this. That could make it easy. Otherwise, you could reach out through the journalism network that we've established at SPJ to kind of track these organizations. One thing I'd want to know is, do they run a college program or a high school program, and kind of keep track of who else is in that space.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So Dave
Would
Collier,
it also be,
Dave Collier, John, has been doing some research in this category. He's one of our former presidents, and also wears the hat of president of another kind of trade group. I'm forgetting which one it is, but he was doing a deep research project It's a little, he's a little bit coy about it, meaning he has information that he's not necessarily at liberty to turn over to us. But it might be the request coming from you might make sense. Like, we had this meeting today, you understand that he might have some information that could be helpful to our continued efforts. He very much supports SPJ putting a strategic plan in place, absolutely. And he's, we've had a lot of conversations with him, but he might be willing to turn over some amount of data if asked again from you, not me. Okay.
I'd like to know how the other organizations are communicating / showing their membership what they are doing for them. Like how they are benefiting. I think that every one of us on this call could explain just how we benefit our membership.
Hey, Matt, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Does someone has music in the background? Could please mute? That would be great. Okay, sorry about that. You can proceed.
That's okay. But clearly, our membership doesn't necessarily all think that. I think that, and when I was in daily journalism, we always joke that, we don't know how to promote ourselves. I think that that's something that a lot of organizations struggle with, but some do it better than others. So I'd like to know, like, what are they doing to show and prove their worth to their membership? And I really do mean show, because I think we try to tell, but I don't think we always show.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else with any requests for this? I guess my question is, who gets this information? John, is that something HQ can pull together?
Yeah, we can take the lead on it.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I'll work out the Dave suggestion's a good one. And like I said, there may be some other associations that already sort of consolidate this beyond journalism organizations, but could get it to those for us.
Okay.
We'll find a way.
Awesome. And you guys can also obviously track down our finances, our membership trends, and our programming. So.
Yeah, Patty, if you want to send me that list, I tried to take some notes as you were going there, but yeah, we can try our best to pull as much as that is concerned. Some of our data is going to be very hard to figure out though, because of our database situation. So we'll try our best, but
Right.
we'll do what we can to give this group a chance to make informed decisions. It may not be perfect.
Yeah.
Got it.
And what kind of time frame do you need or want to pull that together? I think that would be good for our next meeting.
Well, you tell me when the next meeting is, and that's the time frame.
Good answer. All right, man. How about Saturday
A
morning?
deadline like that would probably get us nice and focused. I don't think it would take, I mean, maybe a week or so to gather it all. Now, the other organizations thing could take a little longer. The data points that Patty was referring to at our disposal, probably sooner.
Uh-huh. Before we turn to the calendar, does anyone have anything? Yeah, we can get one of those for you at the end of this call for sure. Does anyone have anything else to add in terms of the data we need for our next meeting, for our next steps? This is a really good list. Seeing none, how often, I mean, if you look at the calendar, we got February, March, we got 2.5 months. Do you guys want to try to meet weekly, every other week? What's the group's preference?
When Victor was leading, we were meeting every other week, but then when it came to a point where we needed to buckle down on some things, then we met every week. So, but we started off meeting every other week, didn't we, Victor? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I do think this is crunch time. If we are gonna, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, actually, yeah, there's 10 weeks between now and April 1st. So if we met every other week, 5 meetings, 5 themes, we could conceivably work on that timetable. And then as we get closer and we need to, kind of like what you guys did last time. So that calendar would make our next meeting Does this time work for folks if we just keep it standardized, noon on Friday? It's a busy day for me, but I'm happy to spend my lunch doing this. It's important work. So our next meeting would be January 31st. February 14th, I can't do. I actually have I'm in a debate that day, moderating a debate. So maybe, what can I suggest this? Could our next meeting be the 24th? And from there, we meet every 2 weeks? That would give staff a week to pull together the data. And so even if you don't tackle theme 1 that day, we could at least spend some time sifting through that data and try to figure out then maybe what our 5 themes might be before we tackle them and go deep on each one. How's that sound, you guys?
That generally sounds pretty good for me. We have a faculty meeting the last Friday of the month, and so it's going to depend on where these things fall. That might be tricky for me, but generally I think it'd be fine if we could do that.
Okay. Yeah, looking at the calendar, it looks like the only last Friday of the month would be the last March 27th, which once we're at the finish line, we can readjust so everyone gets on that call, because I do think we should go to great lengths to make sure we're all involved in the last few discussions. So why don't we do that? Let's, hearing no one say anything otherwise, if we meet noon next Friday, the 24th, and then plan on meeting every other week, every other Friday at that time. John, do you think that is ample time to pull together some of this information?
Yeah, well, we'll do it the best we can. I don't see a reason we couldn't.
Okay. Well, I know Monday is a holiday, so obviously that makes for a shorter turnaround time.
That's okay. We'll get what we can, and we'll work with what we have, and then we'll just keep going as we go. I think it shouldn't be, I'm maybe optimistic, but it shouldn't be too hard to pull this stuff together.
Awesome. I know there was a question from a vet about the database. Maybe we can inform the group about the latest on that. But first, I want to just make sure that anyone has any questions about our workflow or our calendar or what. Again, I kind of glossed over the focus groups. That information is all there. Looks like Lauren has a hand up.
I'm observing not on the task force, so if I have permission to speak, I want additional one observation, have one question. I think what's being put together is really great, but I think one missing piece is board buy-in, and I'd strongly encourage the task force with whatever the 5 themes are going to be to bring those 5 themes to the board at the February 1st meeting, so people have a chance to weigh in either agree or disagree, because I'd hate to see this group do all that work developing strategies and tactics that the board ultimately doesn't support.
I support that, unless anybody objects. I think we can certainly have Matt give an update on where we are so far in the discussion at that point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Following up, so I agree. But were we going to try to nail down the 5 or however many topics sooner than later? Because, for example, most of us probably have what our 5 would be. I have written down here what my 5 would be. And do we want to nail that down, or do we want to just say, okay, no, we know we want to do memberships, let's just focus on that now and the rest of them later? If we're going to do it like that, then waiting for the person talking to it's fine. But if we're going to nail down what the 5 are going to be on this call, for example, then I think we probably need to put that information.
Yeah, I think my preference would be not on this call necessarily, but to nail down, approach this holistically. Maybe what I can do is cook up some sort of spreadsheet where we can just put down our 5, rank them, and then we'll have, at our next meeting, we can all do that over the course of a week, which are the top 5, and which are in the second tier, and we'll have kind of some data points backing that up. Like if membership, for example, there's a living task force that has 55 points, something else has 54, 53. We'll be able to kind of approach it more methodically. I do think it's best to know the 5 rather than say, let's tackle membership first, because then you don't really approach it, fully.
Yeah, I agree with you. it that way makes more sense.
Yeah.
And if we're going to do it that way, then getting that information, you know, per Lauren's point, to the board sooner than later would be.
Yeah, I think that what that effort would entail is us at our next meeting, before the end of our next meeting, figuring out which 5 we suggest or recommend, and then we would be able, because that's our only meeting before that February 1st meeting. I think Lauren raises a good point. And it doesn't seem unmanageable. If I can get that survey out tonight or tomorrow, you know, we'll all have 6 or 7 days to figure out and rank, and we can go from there. To our tech guys, Victor and Mike, what's the best platform to do that? Is that just a Google Sheet, or is there some other app that lends itself to that?
I was almost thinking about a Google form and then allowing each of us to see each other's responses, if that helps.
I
And
love
then
that idea.
you can tabulate all the responses in one experience, or we can break them out across the entire committee. But that might be a clean, easy way to do it. Mike might have something better.
Yeah, Mike, what do you think?
I don't have anything. I think the form's best.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that'll work. I can do that. And Mike points out that there are board members on this task force, so something to keep in mind.
I don't think we'll have trouble getting buy-in. I think we carry a majority vote.
Yeah. No, I mean, open communication is always a good thing. So I think we should work on that. I'll get the form out this weekend, and we can start voting. And then when we meet again on Friday, we'll have the data from John and HQ. We'll have that Google form, and we can just, you know, see if there's a discussion to have about those. I imagine some of our 5 will be pretty similar. There may obviously be some discussions when we get down to 3, 4, 5. Anyone else?
Hey, Matt, quick question. Like, how are we planning to share our work with membership over the next few months? Like, obviously, if somebody tunes into the board meeting in February, they're going to see whatever report is given there. But are there certain points along the way that we're going to give an update to whether chapter leaders or just the membership as a whole, so that they know sort of what we're doing and what we're thinking about?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think by the nature of a public SPJ board meeting on February 1st, there will be, which we can share with membership, the document of our 5 themes right there. So from the outset, you know, and we're already posting everything. I don't know, Jennifer, do you have that latest spreadsheet up there on the page? If you could add that, if you haven't. I just think we should add stuff to that page and be super upfront, let membership know in as many ways as possible, from social media to carrier pigeon. And that February 1st board meeting, I think the beauty of having that as part of the process is that then that becomes a natural point where we can share that. I do think we can, you know, to the extent, I don't know how open your meetings were last time, you know, but we can try to advertise these more. We can have another forum. I think that's something for the group to discuss. Any other thoughts on that? Do you have a preference, April, since you brought it up?
I don't really have a preference, and I guess I asked the question knowing that there probably wouldn't be an easy answer, but we just know our membership tends to want more information.
Yeah.
So I just wondering, and maybe John or Jen, you may have some thoughts on, you know, like how much information should we be providing to members? Is it enough just to give like a monthly update saying, hey, we met on this day, here are some quick high points, or should we, you know, should we be more open and tell them sort of a little bit more information? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on sort of like how we should be sharing information with members between now and when the final report comes out at EIGA.
Yeah, I think we can post documents to our webpage, share them with members via email and social platforms, and do that on, you know, obviously, as I said, end of the month is one place to do that. And then we'll have 2 more months where we do some heavy lifting. I think, John or Jennifer, do you have thoughts on what to do over that 2-month span?
I think it kind of depends on what you think the members would expect. I think you've done a lot to get their feedback from the get-go, and in exchange, they hopefully are trusting that this group will use that data to come up with good work, and then we'll bring the work back to them, and maybe at one point or two to just say, how does this feel? But I don't. I guess if you're I'd announce that it's progressing and maybe give some high level updates, but unless you want more and more feedback coming in, I don't know that you'd do much more than that at this point.
Go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, I'd say on that point, that is exactly the danger. If you put out information, are you asking for more members' feedback at that point? Or are you simply reporting out where we stand as a task force? I'd lean more to the second. We can't continue to ask members for more and more information. We have to make some decisions and then see how folks react, I think. And so we can use all the usual channels. Matt, you just cited several. In addition, leads, the weekly leads. I'd be happy to use the president blog to provide an update just after the April 1 meeting. And maybe that's the point at which we do some kind of, hey, members, what do you think? Here's the way it's going. Here's what the plan we won board approval for, and yeah, those are just two other venues: the leads and the president's blog.
Yeah, and that actually might be a good time to solicit opinions, because we'll have chosen our 5. You based, pretty exhaustively on feedback we've received over almost a year and a half, or excuse me, 7 months. And then in that week between when we finish those 5 and the board meets, the board will be able to reflect on the 5 and whatever feedback we get from the audience. So maybe that seems like an opportune time to solicit that feedback. Any other thoughts?
Maybe not after this meeting, because this is just, introductory, but, I think we need for lack of a better word, sanctity of this group to be able to discuss and bounce ideas off of each other and just brainstorm. I feel like if we invited a whole bunch of people in, it might be more difficult to do that. Too many cooks in the kitchen. But what we could do is after each meeting or after a significant meeting, we report back on that. If we feel like we need to be more transparent than we already are, we could maybe do that as, just report back that we met today and we're continuing this or whatever. But I feel like if we have too many, if this was an open meeting, that I think that'd be difficult to get any work done. But yet, after meetings where we want to announce something or just allow people a peek into what we were talking about, we certainly could let folks know what's going on.
I think you raise valid points. And I would underscore that this group, again, predating me, has been completely transparent and gone out of its way to keep people updated on every step of the way. I mean, the webpage we set up has been updated on a very regular basis. Any other task force members? Before I turn to you for a second, Lauren, any other task force members? Mike also in the chat field, as you guys can see, is agreeing with Yvette's discussion and also raises a bookkeeping question. Let's continue to use that Google Drive folder for the task force, just so we button that down. Lauren?
This is an issue I'm very interested in, which is why I plan to attend as many of these meetings as I can. But I just wanted, as a point of order, to remind everybody that the board approved a transparency policy. So any member who is interested in observing this meeting has a right to, which isn't to say that I'm suggesting you go out and advertise and solicit people. I agree with everything that you're saying, but just I wanted to remind everybody that if a member expresses an interest in any task force or committee meeting, they're allowed to observe.
Thanks, appreciate that. And I agree, that is the policy. Any other thoughts? I think we have a good plan of attack. Thanks to John for jumpstarting this discussion with his approach. Anyone else? Okay. Have a great long weekend, everyone. Thank you for your time and your work. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you,
See
Matt.
you guys.
Hey,
Okay.
before everybody goes, were we going to talk
Oh,
about?
sorry. Wait, time out. Thank you. Yvette, I apologize. Yeah, Yvette wanted a quick update on the database. Patty or John, could you bring everyone up to speed on that?
We'll let John take that.
Yeah, so we are in a stage where we're reviewing one other provider. Essentially, we're looking to not stick with Blackbaud, who was the original choice last year, simply because after another study and review of their product, we're not sure it's the right fit for what our needs are at this moment in time. So we reviewed another provider called Impexium that some of our peer organizations use and have had high reviews of. And we saw a demo of theirs and just received some pricing on their product. And I'm in a stage where I'm going to negotiate some options with them before we would move forward on a final proposal from them. But that final proposal would tell us if we think that's the right choice. And then if the other option, there's I guess a second option of an internally built database system that would be handled by staff that we're considering as well. The goal would be to have something figured out and already sort of in the works by the April board meeting.
That's good.
I would just insert, John, that I've had some requests from board members to be pulled into that decision, or at least get information kind of real time as you're getting to the finish line. So at the February 1 meeting, if you'd give us an update on where things stand and where your deliberations stand, anything you know about the cost vis-a-vis what we were paying in the short time we had the Blackbaud contract. Yeah, it's as we've talked about, it's a big topic among our members because they can't get the data that they want real time.
Yeah, we want to do this one right for sure. So Impexium came in a little higher than I wanted them to. That's why I want to talk with them about some options. So
yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the nudge, Yvette. Apologies again for neglecting that. It's a good update. I'm glad we're taking that seriously. Okay, y'all. Enjoy the weekend.
Okay.
Bye all. Thanks, Matt.